Now, the Prime Minister, Anthony Albanese, he loves taking a swipe at the opposition, and this was no different in his big pre-budget Made in Australia pitch in Brisbane this week. When he was asked a question in the media conference about the upcoming Queensland state election, he couldn't resist. Have a listen.
And I think the last time that Queenslanders took a risk by voting LNP in the state, what they got was mass sackings, mass cuts in education and health and transport and services.
Mass sackings, cuts in education. Joining me now, the man who was in charge back then, our Friday night regular, former Queensland Premier Campbell Newman. What do you make of that little slap?
Well, mate, it's like this. He demeans himself as PM, and I'm afraid it undermines his own credibility, repeating the same old tired mantra, which is Labor's, lies on these things, I'm afraid. And that's the only way I can characterise it. Let's just unpick it very quickly. We were presented with a massive budget deficit, ballooning debt. We had to take action, and we actually made 14,000 people redundant, and they were paid voluntary redundancy packages, VRs. So they weren't just sacked. As to cuts, well, we didn't cut frontline workers. We didn't cut teachers. We didn't cut nurses. In fact, we provided VRs for older nurses who weren't retiring at the time because of the state of the economy. And that was to make way for young nurses who couldn't get a job in the Queensland public health system. We employed, I think it was about 1,100 frontline coppers. And so let's just examine the performance of the administration I led. By the time that I left office, crime had gone down 15 to 20% across most categories, the things you've been talking about this evening in Victoria, break-and-enters, robberies, etc. That was because we ran the bikies out of the state. We had actually turned around our hospitals. We had the best surgery waiting times in the nation, and we'd eliminated ambulance ramping. In our schools, I can't point to any stats offhand, but I can tell you one, that there was I think it was about $150 million or $200 million maintenance backlog at our schools, and we got rid of that. And the point I'm making is that the Labor fixate on things they can grab on and manipulate with the minds of the community. But I can point to a Courier Mail editorial in December 2014 that actually said the Newman government was an outstanding government. This is a matter of the public record, and said that on all sorts of measures we were outperforming expectations and we were doing what we were elected to do, which was to clean up the mess of Anna Bligh and her government. So that's my answer to that. And again, I just close by saying he demeans himself by repeating falsehoods.
Yeah, and the most intriguing thing about all of that, Campbell, in the way that you've outlined it, and I was living in Victoria at the time when Jeff Kennett took over from Joan Kerner, the style that Kennett and you had when you realised and you planned for this, as I know you did, in the year before you won the election, you knew what you had to do. And it strikes me that that's exactly what we need to have happen right now, particularly in Victoria that's broke and in Queensland that's not much better. Someone's got to make some hard decisions. We need some hard nuts like you.
Well, we do need hard decisions, and again, I contrast the approaches. You've got a government now here in Queensland, and indeed in Victoria, by the way, that rather than deal with reckless spending and bloated bureaucracies like we were doing, what they're doing is they're putting up taxes and charges. And it's not just coal royalties in Queensland that have been put through the roof to be the largest mining taxes in the world. There's these insidious increases in things like land tax and stamp duty, which, by the way, we cut, and we froze car registration. So, there's this big debate about cost of living. And I just say to viewers tonight, if government is reckless in its spending and it taxes, even if you don't think you're being taxed because, say, it's a state government, it all flows through to the cup of coffee, to the price of a new home, to the rent that you're paying. It actually is a drag on the economy. So you need efficient, lean government that's focused on outcomes that really, really matter, not sort of, these sort of platitudes that we continue to hear and constant announcements. I know you want to talk about this manufacturing announcement. I mean, that's another, sort of thought bubble that isn't going to go anywhere. In fact, it's worse than that if you want to get into that.
Well, I do. I mean, I woke up yesterday morning and I saw that front page exclusive in The Australian where we're talking about having a Made in Australia Act, for God's sake. Now, the moment that I hear that big government is going to get involved in projects that they can't get private enterprise to invest in because private enterprise is too clever and knows it's not going to make a buck, that's when I start to get really worried, Campbell.
Well, absolutely, mate. The 5-year plans in Soviet Russia didn't work too well. The 5-year plans in North Korea have driven the people into, basically to poverty, and it didn't work well in China, and they opened up and, unleashed the potential of their people. But look, Steve, I'm waving around this roll of toilet paper for a reason, because Sorbent last year, a manufacturer of toilet paper and facial tissues, is halving its production in Australia and sending it up to Indonesia. Why? Because their gas price has gone up 300%. But I'll also give you that probably IR has got them thinking, my gosh, this is not a good place to be. This country is being run by absolute, nutcases in terms of their understanding of business. High energy costs, gas, high electricity costs, red tape and green tape that's just becoming an impenetrable jungle, and ridiculous IR so-called reforms that mean it is really, it's really expensive and difficult to employ people, and even worse, it's hard to fire non-performers. Those things will mean that this manufacturing strategy goes absolutely nowhere, mate. That's what it'll do. And, then we see today Wayne Swan coming in to have a go at the new head of the Productivity Commission that Labor appointed, mind you. So they appoint someone, and then the first time this lady says something they don't like, they go and they get Wayne Swan out to belt her around the head and say she doesn't know what she's talking about. Well, I don't agree with Danielle over there at the Productivity Commission, a range of things that she has said already in the job, but I agree with her on this one. It will drive money away from productive areas of the economy. Governments can't pick winners. The Labor Party don't understand that. Mate, and by the way, I'm in private enterprise. I'm not, people might say, oh, look, he's a politician or he was in the army. Well, for, about 40% of my employment life, I've actually been in business. I've been in a senior executive in a fairly large Queensland company, but I've also run my own business as I do now. And I just get the giggles when I see, Labor politicians talking about business, because they have no idea. They are clueless. And they don't know at all what it's going to take. And if they really want to know, they're going to point me to some sort of committee and I'll tell them the news they don't want to like. But again, it's get out of the energy sector with all this net zero stuff. Open up Australia to gas on shore. I mean, people are talking about LNG import terminals for a country that's awash with gas. Wind back what you've done on IR and make it easy to employ people, and get to work on getting rid of red tape and green tape. And I could write a book on the nonsense that we have to go through in the financial services sector that no one wants to touch. In fact, they want to go the other way and make it more complicated and less competitive for Australians.
Well said. Love your passion. Please don't quote Wayne Swan, the worst treasure in history, at me. And if I never see his face on TV again, I'll be a very happy man. Campbell Newman, we'll see you next Friday night.